Hello and welcome to Circ Online's Meet the Authors 2021. The theme of this year's online conference is workforce, and we have a special edition of the Scottish Journal for Residential Childcare with this theme being released today. We're delighted to be holding a series of conversations with some of the authors who have contributed to this special edition to hear a bit more about their writing and get to know the people behind the papers. I'm joined here by Cathy Grant, authors of Reflections on Life Space Intervention and Social Work. Cathy, hello.
Hiya.
Cathy, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your connection with residential childcare?
At the minute, I'm a children and family social worker within an area team in Falkirk. I've been in that post for about 7 years. Prior to that, and prior to qualifying as a social worker, I've worked for a number of years in kind of a few different residential childcare settings. And I think during the pandemic and helping back in these services made me really miss it.
And your article talks a bit about that missing working in residential childcare. Can you tell us what your article was about?
Well, it was just kind of my reflections on my experience of helping the residential services during the pandemic and how it made me miss the opportunities. I guess like kind of working every day with young people and building. I think also we build relationships as social workers, but as residential workers, they're really different. It's a kind of special kind of relationship. And I was like, oh, I missed that.
And what was your motivation for writing the article, and was there any key messages that you were hoping to share?
I guess it was just me like putting down on paper, showing my thoughts. As I really spending time back working in the services, and again, it just got me thinking about the bits that I missed and how we can maybe kind of get some of that into kind of frontline like social work.
So the title was Reflections on Life Space Intervention and Social Work. Can you tell us a bit about the role of critical reflection and how that might impact on practice?
I think being able to reflect critically in your practice is really important, probably essential. People don't like being criticised, but I think if it can be reframed as like a learning opportunity, critical reflection can only be a good thing. We don't get things right all the time, and I think especially with young people, it's sometimes about owning that and saying like, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. And I think in terms of the kind of power shift or the dynamic of that relationship, that can be really important for people, not just other professionals, but the young people that you're like working with and for sometimes. I think that's really important. For me, I think supervision's really important in terms of supporting critically reflective practice rather than reactive practice sometimes. I think as social workers and like residential workers, it can be quite scary sometimes working with a lot of risk. So I think having the space and time to talk about that with your supervisor within our teams is really important. And I think kind of in the bigger picture, like positive change and kind of shifts can usually only happen if people are able to critically reflect and not kind of dwell on like the catastrophe, if you like, but think, well, how are we going to avoid that to happen again, or how are we going to make things better or different? So I think it's essential that we kind of continue to do things like that.
We're in a global pandemic just now, and that's part of the reason that you did experience working in residential childcare for the short time recently, and you wrote about that in your article. And you wrote about challenging the challenge of balancing the protection of self and others from the virus, but also still doing the job of protecting the needs of children, young people and families. What has that been like? What is that like? Because it's still ongoing.
Oh, it's really tough. But I suppose as a group, social workers and like residential workers, we respond to crisis on a daily basis. So we just kind of rolled up our sleeves and got on with it and continue to do that. Like a massive challenge has been like the lack of access to our services. For a long, long time, like the services we would usually refer to, like to support us with that task, have either been closed, operating virtually or working with like kind of reduced staffing, so like CAMs, GPs, family support. other kind of community-based resources you would usually tap into. So I've got to say it's been difficult to fill the gap, but it's been impossible, I think, and that's been tough. It's also been quite tricky, I guess, to meet them maybe kind of see the more kind of difficult to reach, if you like, young people that we normally see far more often, because I suppose COVID has created a kind of legitimate reason for people to keep us more at arm's length, and you can't really challenge that. So that's been really tough, I think, because we do still really worry and want to help, but if people are saying no, then there's only so much we've been able to do about that.
Absolutely. Worker, you must feel very torn in terms of trying to reach children, young people and their families. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. And I suppose one of the ways that you can reach out to children and young people is through relationships, and that is a theme that runs like right through your paper, that power and importance of relationships. And there was a quote, but Kathy, that if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to read it out. Relationships that perhaps we didn't know we needed until the effects of the pandemic took away these valuable moments of being there for each other. Can you tell us a bit about that quote and what you were thinking about when you wrote that?
I guess I just miss my team, I suppose. I think we all do. And in terms of moving forward and what the future looks like, I guess there are pros and cons with the way we're working at the minute. I think the use of technology has been helpful in terms of kind of meetings and getting everybody together, sometimes at really short notice, the different parts of kind of the country. My local authority is keen to keep homework every part of the week, and that will be helpful when you've got reports and stuff to do, but it is a challenge, I guess, when you don't have the spaces to kind of be with your teams, but also kind of the spaces to meet the families and young people we work with, and kind of people kind of just drop in to see us if they need, or just if they feel that they want to, it's kind of certain times for whatever reason. And again, just it's been hard for me, I can only talk about my experience, but not having a physical team round about me all the time. I really do miss that, and kind of through chats, my kind of colleagues seem to feel the same. I suppose it's the kind of informal supervision, like the brainstorming, problem solving, just having a bit of a laugh, or the times where the underrated cup of tea will just appear on your desk during a really long call, or a difficult chat with somebody. And I think kind of Mark Smith's written quite a lot about caring for the carers. So I suppose I'm going to go back and look at some of that stuff, because I think now especially it's really kind of topical at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. It just really highlights how important the workforce is to us all, especially when it's relationship-based practice that you're operating with. Yeah. Another theme that came out for me, Kathy, in your paper was when you talk about life space and the potential of the residential milieu, and you talk about the work of Laura Steckley, who's based at Strathclyde University, where your services are based. Can you tell us a wee bit about the key messages in this bit of your article?
One question, I think I'm by no way even close to an expert on this, but it's something that I'm really interested in. And I think I would describe it as basically, when done properly, with the right people in the right environment, I think residential childcare has massive potential to help children and young people begin to, I guess, start to understand, think about, talk about, and hopefully begin to recover from some of the past trauma and adversity they've experienced. And I've seen settings that absolutely nail it, and I've seen some that, for whatever reason, don't just quite hit the mark. So I suppose, you know yourself, if you walk in somewhere and you're like, oh, this feels nice, or I like it here, but you don't maybe really know why. So I think creating a therapeutic milieu is a real skill, and maybe it just feels nice, but people don't necessarily know the hard work that's went into achieving that. So again, I think the concepts of kind of life space work and kind of therapeutic milieus running kind of parallel. And our residential setting that I think successfully creates a residential milieu is one that kind of meets the social and emotional needs of young people by creating, like purposely creating somewhere that uses the everyday opportunities that are available in a therapeutic way. And I've had the privilege of being kind of taught by Laura at Strathclyde Uni, and I just really kind of like her work and our discussions around that. I think it just kind of brings it to life because she's done it, I suppose.
Absolutely. Something you were saying there kind of jumped out at me. You were saying it seems quite simplistic, but it's actually really complicated. Can you tell us a bit about the complexities involved in making something skillful appear simplistic?
Well, I guess maybe kind of some of Laura's work talks about that quite a lot as well. I really connect with her kind of writing and research. I guess maybe like kind of Mark Smith and Dan Hughes, because they've done it and it kind of comes to the heart. She's written quite a lot about, like Laura has written quite a lot about kind of using activities and how kind of tapping into just kind of the opportunities that exist within that does seem really simplistic, but it's really skillful because I guess you need to be able to know the young people and the dynamics within certain groups really well to know like when is the opportunity, like this is going to help here or this is could make things like no go is great. So I think it does take practice and skill, and so it doesn't always work. I think within kind of cultures within residential units, that's just like kind of what you do and you learn for each other, I guess. But I think it does take time to learn, and it does like it sometimes it can come natural, but I think it's investing in those relationships that makes kind of those kind of scenarios work. And I think sometimes it can be complex because like people that work in that environment, it is really challenging. So, but I think it's important sometimes to think about the unsettled shifts. No, it's like a bad shift. So I personally, and it's hard when you're in the moment and you're like, this is a nightmare again. But I think for me, when kids start to communicate the difficult and hard to talk about stuff, it usually comes out in behaviour first of all. So I think kind of going back to maybe the critical reflective part and thinking about reframing that and think, well, they obviously feel safe enough to begin to, first of all, think about that difficult stuff and then kind of start kind of trying to communicate that. I think for them, they must feel safe enough within the environment or the therapeutic milieu that you've created and safe enough with the people round about to start to do some of that. So I think it just kind of when you're working with people and kind of in their home, their life space, it can be really difficult to sometimes remember that. So I think it's going to be challenging because you're creating that environment that's going to help them get through the challenging times. So I would say kind of remembering that is really important.
Absolutely. So 2021 in Scotland, we're talking about residential childcare. We can't do that without asking a question about the promise. What do you think will change or needs to change for residential childcare? And can I ask what your views on the role of the promise are in relation to that?
I think you should talk about the promise for days, I suppose. In my experience, I'm glad to see like workforce support as one of the priority areas, but I don't want to get too controversial. I hope they actually spend the time speaking to the frontline workers and know the people in strategic roles so that the workforce get what they feel that they need or what kind of they say that they want. I suppose another priority I feel passionate about is the right to education. I think children and young people that live in residential settings that don't perhaps have specialist on-site provision, like are, in my experience, still excluded from kind of education. And again, I can only talk about my experience, but the kids I've worked with in residential settings that do attend mainstream schools are often on part-time timetables, excluded, spending most of their day in learning support, not doing very much at times, no accessing much of curriculum. So I think this is, rather than kind of going on about maybe that kind of stuff, thinking, well, this is an opportunity, how do we work together to be more creative, inclusive, get young people involved. I think what we've seen during the pandemic, the use of technology, home like tap into some of that. I think this is like massive potential to help young people in education, and that's kind of what's going to give them opportunities to achieve in the future and kind of achieve their dreams and all that kind of sometimes cheesy sounding stuff. But I really hope that, like for us and the young people, that the promise does actually make that kind of difference, and it's not just another, you know, we know that education is a right. You're like, well, come on, let's do something about it.
It's really interesting and really helpful to hear it outlined like that, and so clearly linked to your own experience. When you wrote your article, Cathy, you wrote it from dual perspectives of a residential worker and a social worker. And in the introduction, you reframed slightly what you consider your job to be. What advice would you give to any of our viewers or listeners who might be considering a career in the social care sector just now?
I would say do it. Like, I love my job. I really do. It's often very demanding of your time and emotion, I guess. Financial rewards aren't great, but that's not why any of us, I guess, would come into that line of work. We want to help people. You'll definitely get loads of opportunity to do that. I guess you can't be needy in terms of wanting loads of compliments, because that doesn't happen very often. But it seems like when a kid says, "Oh, I think you're quite sound," that they're like, "All right, I've nailed that one," or like, "I'm getting somewhere here." But then you'll get sometimes, and it happens like loads in residential as well. Kids will say, "Oh, like, I want to do a job like this when I'm older." So that makes you kind of think, "Oh, that is kind of worthwhile. We're doing something right."
Great. And any advice for our viewers or listeners who might be thinking about submitting an article to the Scottish Journal of Residential Childcare?
Yes, I was really nervous about putting myself out there, but I've enjoyed the writing part, probably more than the talking about it part. But I think anybody with direct experience, regardless of what qualifications, has definitely got something to contribute. So I think if you've got an idea or something that you want to say, just get in touch with one of the editors, and there's loads of support out there for the people that want to do that. So I would say, I go for it. It's been good.
Thank you so much, Cathy. Cathy, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today, to hear a wee bit more about you and about your article. Article Reflections on Life Space Intervention and Social Work is free to read or download from today on the journal section of the Celsius website, and there are other recordings available in this series. Thank you to everybody for joining us.